everyone. Welcome to the ProgCast. I'm Gregg Bendian, your host, bringing you weekly discussions into the frontiers of music and all kinds of genres. And I'm really pleased today to have a dear old friend and a collaborator and really one of my favorite musicians in the world. He's a wonderful pianist and keyboardist, synthesist, an arranger, producer, conductor. He is on it. He's multi-hyphenated. He is Dave Witham. Welcome, Dave.
Oh, thanks a lot, Greg. Glad to be on the ProgCast. I was nervous about the ProgCast because that's one thing I don't know much about is prog. So I was.
Well, there's a lot.
I see this as a wide-ranging discussion, so we're in good stead here.
Well, you know, in some ways, there's progressive jazz, right? There's progressive classical music. So I really look at it in all of its forms. If somebody's doing something,
it's all music, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, I don't know that we've ever spoken very much in all the times that we've collaborated. I should tell folks that Dave has been my keyboardist of choice whenever I perform my music in Los Angeles. We've had a lot of really cool collaborations over the years. Each time I would go out on the road to play the music from my Trio Pianissimo albums, I would go and do the West Coast stuff with Dave Witham, usually with Joel Hamilton on bass. And we have some memorable encounters from those days. But also, we had the opportunity a number of years ago to play together on a night that Jeff Gauthier put together when he was putting together, I guess, a week of performances at the Stone in New York City. And Dave and I played in two groupings there, the Goatette.
You were amazing that night, I gotta say. You stepping into a band that had been an established lineup for 20-some years, and you just walked in, owned it. It was beautiful.
Well, you know, I heard my buddy Nels Cline on all that stuff.
Well, sure, and I mean, yeah, you guys are really close. And then we played in, what did we call it? We called it Goat Structure, didn't we?
Goat Structure, you're right, yes. And that was you on keyboards and devices with me and Stuart Liebig on bass and Jeff Gauthier on electric violin.
Yeah, I think there's evidence of that, actually.
And there is video of that. Yeah. It looks like we're playing in a in a burnt out structure, but it's just the lighting is not great.
Well, that's the Stone for you. I mean, God,
yeah, it's definitely
was the Stone.
Yeah. So that's, and then of course we played in multiple settings on my 50th birthday concert at the Baked Potato.
50th birthday concert at the Baked Potato, of all places. I was.
That was a memorable night. That
sure was.
I would definitely like to go into some details about that at some point. But Dave, tell me about your young Dave Witham's life and your stories. I mean, you must have had an interesting childhood growing up as you did in Southern California.
Well, I grew up in Long Beach, California, and still live here. And Long Beach, California was pretty unique. They had a school district that had a great focus on music due to a guy named Fred Ohlendorf, like kind of an old school German guy. And he had a music camp up in Arrowhead called Arrow Bear. And it was kind of a place, you know, like kind of Euro thing, you know, where you go in the summer and you play in the outdoors, and, you know, it's very much the old school thing. So this thing was going on, and this guy Fred literally got all the teachers, they met around a coffee table and charted a course for the Long Beach Unified School District, kind of in the glorious time when there was lots of money to go around and enthusiasm and all of that. So, you know, high schools had two orchestras, a giant marching band, all sorts, just two stage bands.
How old are you?
Well, this is high school, but even it went all the way down to elementary school. I mean, I played bass drum. That was my first instrument.
Well, what years?
Well, Jesus, that would have been 50, 70, 60, you know, the early 60s going up to the 70s. I started high school in 72, you know, so it was it was a golden time in Long Beach and California for the school system until this thing called Proposition 13 passed, which really adjusted the property taxes so they wouldn't, so they wouldn't price old people out of their houses. But consequently, the schools took a beating after that, and there was a big decline. But as I said, it was kind of a golden era through probably the late 50s through the, through 78 is when that would have been. And so we had all that going on, we had the pep band. I played tuba in the pep band in high school, I played bass drum when I was in elementary school because I had a drum set for a while. And then my mom lured me into playing the organ. And I had a teacher from the age of 7, this gal, Louise Knutson. And I think she lived in a trailer park in Huntington Beach, but I think she might have still been playing in bars at that point. But like immediately, she's getting me into harmony and the circle of fifths and changes and playing out of fake books and stuff like that. I mean, it kind of made a game out of it. Every week you'd work on a key and you'd work on your major, minor, augmented, diminished chords and all that stuff. So I got some deep lessons like early on, unbeknownst to me, and, the whole playing out of fake books thing and playing changes and all that stuff, it's very easy. And then, they didn't have an organ in junior high, so they said string bass or tuba, and I could kind of play the trumpet because all my cronies played the trumpet, so it was B-flat instrument, so I picked tuba. Unfortunately, I should have picked the bass. And then a little piano in there, stage band in junior high, and then once I got to high school, when I was the sophomore in high school, there was this guy Rich Shamaria that I was telling you about earlier. Had a trio, and it was like, ooh, this is cool, and they were playing like Vince Guaraldi-ish kind of stuff, and it sounded cool, and he hit me to Oscar Peterson and Jimmy Smith and kind of those exciting guys, and that stuff. And he also hit me to another guy that I think we're going to get off on a tangent with here, and that is Jaki Byard, and that introduction led me on a big journey in life, that's for sure.
Jaki Byard.
Jaki Byard, a walking encyclopedia of music of all kinds. And that was very interesting to me at that point because I was, I don't know, in college, a bit of kind of the jazz snobby kind of guy, and then I took a class in dance accompaniment in 1978 from a lady named Betty Wahlberg, who was one of the original rehearsal pianists for West Side Story. And had worked with Mingus and some other people. I mean, she was the hippest lady, man. And she was a true improviser. It was not stylized. It was like, okay, Ravel, go. And she, something beautiful and something that was counterpoint to the movement. And it was a real eye-opener. It was really, really cool. So at that point, then you think of a guy like Jaki Byard, and it's like, wow, that's the same mindset right there. So I want to get with this guy. And so then I'm going to go, I quit school, much to my father's chagrin, for about 6 months. And then he blew up at the dinner table one night and said, what the hell are you doing? Because he wanted his first son, or only son, to go to college. That was a big dream of his. So I thought, well, I'm going to try to get to New England conservatories, and worked on getting grants and scholarships, etc.
So were you so precocious that high school was a drag for you?
Well, I was always kind of on my way out the door, that's for sure. I mean,
yeah.
By the time I was a junior, I met some people kind of over at Long Beach State, and there was a good thing going over at Long Beach State at that point.
So you were advanced.
Yeah, and, my friends were playing there. They were playing in the band, and by the time I was a senior, like, I had an instruments class where I was supposed to be learning the trumpet, and I was basically driving over to Long Beach State a few miles away and sitting and watching the big band rehearsal with my friends. And Jay Anderson was one of them, and several others that are still, are musical associates of mine. And our band director, Roger Johnson, God bless this guy, he's still going strong. He's like the Dorian Gray of musicians and educators. But he kept us on a long leash. He knew what was up. And so he let me do that stuff, He encouraged, that. So then that fed into Long Beach State, and I went there for 3 years, and played in some of the bands, and was forced to learn classical music, which was classical piano, because I'd moved over to the piano obviously by this point, and didn't have any background in that, you know, and went to the audition and basically folded, and they're like, well, we can't let you be a music major until you know, kind of get up to snuff here. So I had to take lessons, you know, aside from school to kind of get caught up, and then, you know, put in 2 or 3 good years of that, you know, learning some Mozart and Bach and, you know, some easier modern stuff, and just trying to get some facility, you know, and was encouraged there as well. You know, they had horrible pianos in the practice rooms, but somehow I'd wrangle the grand pianos, or you know, I'd managed to get in a classroom or a teaching room. And
I think those you know, those few years, I had them as well, you know, but they were, I mean, in my case as well, experiencing the entire funded,
entirety of music, yeah.
the entire funded arts program in a school system where I grew up in New Jersey. And so, you know, all of the different bands that you mentioned, all of the different, we had percussion ensemble, you know, we could study composition. I was able to take drum lessons with Andrew Sorrell and Steve McCall for high school credit.
That's amazing.
Right? How, you know, how liberal and progressive of education is that? It was crazy. I was spoiled rotten, Dave.
Yeah,
you know, right? But you see this kind of thing where that time period, that's why I asked how old you were, because, you know, that time period where the arts were well funded and people could be educated, even if they weren't musicians, they could have access to arts education.
Yeah.
And that formed a whole middle class, educated, cultured,
right. They've heard an orchestra. They've been on the field trip to go see the orchestra or the chamber music or whatever. You know?
I mean, think about how amazing that is. How amazing that is.
We need it. We need it more now, more than ever. I mean,
more than ever.
And I guess it's up to us. You know, it's like I'm starting to hear the call. I've never been a teacher. I've always been a reluctant teacher because I have kind of a mongrelized, you know, kind of grab bag. It's not a formalized education. I don't have a method I can kind of write down, and so I always use that as an excuse. But you know, the truth of it is, you got to put what you got out there, and the kids do with it what they will. You know, it's not up to you after that. You know.
Well, I've been doing it for 10 years in the university, but you know, privately for composition and drums and percussion for probably 20 years before that, because I always had felt this need to give something back, and to you know, to not complain about people not knowing how this works or how that works, or you know, how aren't people hip to this, or aren't people hip to that? They have the internet. But if you can actually engage young people in looking at music they'd never thought of, and they'd be surprised how much they enjoy it, then I'm winning a little each day, you know.
No, that is the thing. It's that persistence and it's small victories and progress. You know, that's
right. Well, and so Jaki Byard, we should say, you know, is a pianist and a composer. He is known by a lot of people to be involved with the Charles Mingus ensembles, but he's an early proponent of jazz education in the schools. He subbed for Duke Ellington when Duke didn't want to play piano or wasn't able to with the Duke Ellington band. Incredible composer and arranger, chops to burn. I mean, just a classically trained composer as well as a jazz man. And these are such unique, you know, attributes in that time period. But there is a history, Dave, of classically trained jazz pianist, is there not?
Well, yeah. I mean, you've got, you know, the next one that comes to mind is Roland Hanna, is another guy who's like that, you know, and he leans more on the Chopin, you know, to me than the jazz. I mean, he's a swinging pianist, but he doesn't swing like Jaki Byard, man. It's like that's a whole other. Roland's very kind of polite. He's more like John Lewis or something to me.
Let me try playing something of Jaki's to share with folks here for a second.
Jaki Byard, a true polymath.
Oh my goodness, you'll hear it here.
exactly it.
Now these chords.
It's a beauty.
This is 1963.
Yeah, it's just a master of the instrument.
Ah, orchestral.
Yeah, he played the whole instrument. He was all over that thing like a cheap suit.
Roy Haynes on cymbals.
Yeah, he was something else. And for a young me, it was like, wow.
Yeah, you must have just had your
Get up
mind
with this
blown.
guy and see what this is all about, you know?
Yeah. Never heard Roy play like this. Yeah, wow,
Yeah,
this is remarkable.
he got me to open up my sound some. You know, there was another guy, Marshall Otwell, who played with Carmen McRae at the time, who lived down here in Laguna. But he was like, man, you got these big old hands, you know, you need to open up, you know, get some tenths going in your sound. And Jaki had a whole thing written out about the tenths, you know, going through the circle of fifths and all of that. And it was just like, yeah, man, this is how you get that bigger sound going. That's when you start getting the polytonality and just, you know, just
Both hands?
yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, for sure. And then maybe, you know, those 10-fingered kind of chords too, you know, just those really just keep going up harmonic series kind of chords. So that was a good thing. And he laughed about it. You know, you'd walk in, all right, let's go some tenths, you know, and he'd be like, yeah, he'd be, you know, and off we'd go.
Yeah.
He'd start off in that, and it might be the way the lesson started, you know. It's like, come on, let's go. It's calisthenics, you know, here we go.
Okay.
But, you know, you get there and it's like, hey, Jaki, how do you play that fast stride stuff? And he just looked at me and he said, well, you just plant your ass in the middle of the seat and you do this. And just started off on some of that shit, like barely moving. You know, how Tatum was like that too. I mean, they just, such economy of motion. You know,
Right. So, but it's very low to the keyboard, but it's like skittering.
completely efficient. That's why Horowitz and Rubinstein and those guys would go see, you know, Tatum. You know, it's like, this is perfect piano playing in a way. In terms of, you know, it was not just technique, obviously.
Machinery, but
the machinery of it was, wow, it's a marvel, you know. And Jaki had that too, but it was just like, he just sat there, that's how you do it right there. It's like, well, that's I guess that's my lesson today. I guess I got to sit my ass down in the middle of the piano and work on it. So, and he had some pieces written out, and you know, that thing we just heard, To the Party of Love, I found the music, and as it just went by, I mean, basically every note that he played is written down.
it's a written part. It's a composition.
Yeah, it's a composition, yeah. So he had a lot of pieces like that. So you know, we picked a couple, and you know, it's hard.
Can we see that? See a few of those notes?
Yeah. So you know, it started with that moving pattern with the left hand. and he goes and goes, and then you see those the right hand, and it carries on another bit of that, and then it stops. There's a big train tracks,
Mm.
and then it's and we're off, and it's all there. If you want to play it, it's all there.
And the chorale chords, are those voiced out?
That it ends at the end of the stride.
Oh,
So it's because he's the king of the medleys. It seems,
right,
he's
right,
always
right.
stringing things together. So that was that bit. But yeah, he just and he voices like 6/9 chords in fourths. That's a very typical Jaki kind of sound.
Yeah.
So he's got that all, part of his system of total tonal confusion as opposed to the Lydian chromatic concept.
Well, so that's interesting because at the same time you're at New England Conservatory with Mr. Byard, you're also in the orbit of the great George Russell.
Strangely, yes, yeah, it was an odd experience, I must say. Of course, it's like, oh, here's George Russell, and he's got his thing, and he's got this rep, and I just didn't. We never met in the middle somewhere. I was in one of his ensembles that met at 8 in the morning. That had 3 piano players in it, so I just quit going. It was like to sit around for 2 hours to play a chorus aesthetic. It didn't seem like a good use of my time at the moment. And then he had a chromatic concept class. And I just felt like he was just, kind of resting on his laurels at that point. He wasn't really writing, and I think he ended up writing the African game right after that, or maybe he had been working on that. And maybe the next year. But, he put on a Steely Dan record. He put on Asia. And he said, that's Lydian music. And as if, Becker and Fagan studied his book and, said this is, oh, we have to use the Lydian, we have to use that scale to get that, and George said to do, it's like, no. It was very pretentious. And it kind of shut me down. It shut me down right then and there. And, I got through the class and ended up playing some big concert at the end of the year where he did his piece, Listen to the Silence, and I played Arp Odyssey on it. The arp is sitting right here, right next to me.
Really?
And he claimed I tried to destroy his music that night.
How so?
Well, it was a big chaotic, cacophonous moment, and I was making chaos and cacophony with the Arp Odyssey. I was joining in the, I wasn't trying to deliberately destroy his music, but he certainly had it in his mind.
Was it a volume thing? What was it?
I don't even know, man. I really don't. We were playing, and we played the piece, and that was that, and goodbye, and see you later, and it's like, yeah, I just never got along with that guy. Jaki was a little more down to earth.
Was he?
He was funny and affable, and he'd show you stuff, and you'd yap about stuff. He'd pull out Brahms and say, here, check out this Rhapsody. And it's like that was the good stuff. But we only met once a week, so it wasn't like we were, hand in glove that whole year, but he had the Stompers going, so you could go see his big band over there.
The Apollo Stompers.
Yeah, so that was a good thing. And
You never played in the Stompers?
Never played in the Stompers. He always played piano. He always brought his alto, but he would, kind of like Ray Charles that way, because Ray played alto.
Yeah.
But a lot of my friends played in the Stompers. That was a fun band, boy. That's romping, stomping stuff.
Well, speaking of interesting piano players, you recently did a tribute to Mose Allison. Is that right?
Yeah, I got invited to play. Dave Alvin from the Blasters invited me to play with him and his brother on a cover of Mose's song "Wild Man on the Loose." And so we went down there, and Don Heffington played drums from Lone Justice, and Bob Glaub played bass. And it's just a romp and rock cover of the song. It was fun. I've done a couple records with Dave over the years. I did one of the reunion records with Phil a couple years back. They've always been very kind. We kind of came up in the same area of Southern California. We always kid each other about that. Greg Lease put me on to Dave. I would have never met this guy any other way, but Greg was producing one of his records and brought me in, I don't know, this is like probably 10 years ago or something like that. But anyway, we did that, and then the fellas, this guy Don Heffington and Sheldon Gomberg, the producer of the record, along with Moses' daughter Amy, invited me to play another track, Stop This World, and Chrissy Hind ended up singing on that one. Unfortunately, she wasn't there that day, but we did a nice track, kind of bluesy track for her with Fred Tackett on guitar and Mark Goldenberg and Don again on drums and Bob Glaub. So that was great fun. Love Mose. I've had friends that have played with him over the years, and they just always had great things to say about Mose Allison.
That's super cool.
And the record, the tribute record, it's a fundraiser for musicians in need kind of thing. All the proceeds go to a fund that helps folks. So that's always good.
That's wonderful.
And also the documentary that's included with the CD is worth the price of admission. I think it's a BBC doc, but it's really good.
Wow. Yeah, that's an interesting tribute project.
Well, he's an American poet laureate for sure. I mean, he deserves to be celebrated.
Yeah.
It's high time.
I wanted to definitely highlight your involvement with Cryptogramophone Records, our buddy Jeff Gauthier's.
Oh yeah, I see you did
collection.
stuff with him recently. Did you have a Bone Structure reunion the other day? I think on the ProgCast. Sorry.
Yeah, we did. We had me and Stuart and Jeff and GE, and that went live I think last week.
Great.
So yeah, very happy to do that and see those guys and reminisce about some cool times. And your name came up a few times.
I mean, Jeff, what a true patron of the arts, Jeff Gauthier, along with being a fantastic artist himself.
Yeah.
I mean, he's always put his money where his mouth is, and he had a vision, and he made it happen. It was wonderful to be along for that ride, because he called me out of the blue. I think Eric Von Essen had recommended me to him. Perhaps he was going to fire up another band back in the 1990, I think.
What was your connection with Eric?
I knew him. He would come and sub on gigs down at this place called the Studio Cafe in Balboa, down in Newport Beach. And he was a friend of a drummer named Paul Krivik. I don't know if you've ever met Paul.
I know that name, yeah.
Yeah, he's a really great drummer. Somebody I've known since I was, a kid. One of my earliest, jamming friends and all that. But Paul got him in on the thing, and Eric would come down and sub on this little bebop gig that we had down at this beach bar. And I always loved the way he played. I was just like, it was a very open-minded thing, and he was a cellist before, so there was some kind of that going on, and I was, I like this, So we kind of hit it off, and like I said, I think he's the one that recommended me to Jeff.
So this must have been during the time of quartet music.
It was just after quartet music had ended, and Jeff wanted to start a new quartet.
Oh, this is on the heels of quartet music. Jeff moving into his own thing.
Jeff Gauthier Quartet, yeah. But pre-Goatette.
Yeah.
And we made a couple 3 records with that band.
Right.
Internal Memo. That was the first one.
Yeah. And we played material from that, didn't we?
I think so. Did we play the tango off of that? I
think we played at least one piece off of that.
But there was there was a bit of history there, and then unfortunately Eric passed away, and Joel Hamilton. Well, it wasn't. Eric left the band and later passed away, but Joel Hamilton joined the group for the second record, and off we went from there.
Eric is such an interesting composer too.
Oh my God! Well, part of the crypto journey was the first three records that Jeff put out on the label were a tribute to Eric's compositions. So it fell to me and Eric, or to me and Jeff, to go through a huge box of, more than 100 compositions of Eric's to try to sort of make sense of them and decide which ones we wanted to put on these tribute discs. And he, got various combinations of musicians that had played with Eric over the years to play this stuff. But that was a real voyage of discovery and just of appreciation of what a composer this guy was, who just kind of never stopped. I've heard such stories, we're talking about him getting on a train going somewhere in the Midwest and actually writing the score out for the orchestra on the train. I think Quartet Music did a gig with a symphony.
Right.
So, that's
He did those charts?
He apparently did it on the train. I don't know, how the parts got copied. I'm not quite sure of the details, but it was something, fairly legendary like that. It was just, the guy was just full of music, that's for sure, and was willing to share it with seemingly anybody. He was generous that way.
So he recommended you, and you ended up working with Jeff.
Yeah, so we ended up with Jeff, and it's like we just, as the years went by, we just get closer and closer, and the music got better and better, and then it became the Goatette. We added Nels to the lineup and various other people over the years. And I mean, when you mention this association, it saddens me a little bit. It makes me a little wistful because it's not happening anymore. And crypto is kind of in a dormancy right now. I wouldn't say the label is gone, but it's, Jeff's moved on to other things. He's had other assignments, and he's got other, he's got a family now. So I mean, I get that. He didn't at the time we were doing all this stuff with the label, and he was just pouring himself into it. And
I remember
we were all the benefactors of his generosity. There's no doubt. I mean, as
Absolutely.
I say, a true patron of the arts.
Well, and there's just so much variety and such a great, really, I think a very full packaging of a kind of creative music that reaches into a lot of different areas with a lot of different concerns and a lot of different paintbrushes and a lot of different colors.
The immediate comparison is ECM because it was an ethos to me. They had a sound too and all that stuff, but I mean, they had a vision. I mean, they knew how they wanted the art to look. They knew how they wanted the music to sound, not what it was going to be, but that it was going to be sounding good and, recorded very well.
Rich Breen.
Yeah, Rich Breen and Gareth and Alex. I mean, everybody that was involved with the artwork and stuff. I mean, it was the end of the CD era, and we were we were so lucky. I mean,
well, they're artifacts.
Yeah, they are, and it's still important, man. I mean, like that Mose Allison record. It's great to open that up and look, there's a documentary and a book and da da da.
It's an experience.
Maria Schneider's new record. Say you say what you will about the music, but the presentation is unbelievable. I mean, the attention to detail, just the aesthetic, the respect to the musicians, the respect to all of it. It's just, it matters. It's a weird time. I still haven't given over to the streaming thing. I've got all these programs. I have Amazon Music. I never use it. I'd rather go find the CD and put it in the thing and go. It's weird.
I know what you mean. But so also the projects that you were on in these various crypto configurations, you did some stuff with also the Nels Cline Singers, correct?
Yeah, I got to play on what was it? Initiate. That was like 2009 or 8, something like 2009.
Mm-hmm.
And played on a couple things. One was like kind of an Afrobeat deal called King Queen, and I played Nels's Vox Jaguar organ on it, which was kind of wild.
Wow.
And then Another one, I can't remember the name of the piece, but it was a real spacey ballad thing that I played on the roads with some effects and stuff. And we recorded at Fantasy Studios, which was really that was a treat, just to
Wow.
be in the room that Bill Evans made a bunch of great records in that I like. It's,
This is in Oakland, Berkeley.
yeah, Berkeley.
Yeah.
But you always, when you're in places like that, I always catch the vibe. There's always vibrations and stuff in the room, and it's nice to be touched and inspired by that for sure.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we got to play with Nels, and I got Nels to play on my Cryptogramophone record in 2007. And so
Yeah, talk a little bit about that record because that's a really cool record.
Spinning the Circle. Yeah, well, that was a S or get off the pot kind of record. Jeff had offered. He said, let me make your dreams come true, and I was very involved with musical theater, and it was taking up a bunch of, basically all of my time at the time. And, I'm thinking, I need to make this record. And finally it was just like, you better make this record. So at the end of 2006, I assembled the guys and had the music, definitely already had the music, just kind of had to organize it. And we went in and got Rich Breen and Jeff produced, and we got my buddy Jay Anderson, of course. Probably my oldest musical compatriot, with a continuous thing on bass, and Scott Amendola played drums, and John Cross played woodwinds and trumpet. We had made a record in '88, which I actually just remastered. Had Nate Wood go in and lift the veil from these files, and it's like, wow, I'm gonna put this up on Bandcamp. I'm gonna start a thing for that. So that's a record called Online. But getting back to Spinning the Circle, we got the guys in there, and I wanted to make something that had some adventure, but that had melody, and we succeeded in that. I got Luis Conte to play on percussion on a few things, a drum and bass thing, and a kind of a 680 kind of thing that needed him desperately, and an Afrobeat sort of song too. Song's called Afrobeat, simply enough. But that was 2007, and now it's 13 years later, and it still comes up in the shuffle play occasionally. I'm still, it still holds up. So I'm really happy, and I'm so thankful that Jeff held on and let me end up making that record, because right after that, it was pretty much the label was, except for a couple of projects, it was done.
Yeah, and then that's why I wanted to do the Bone Structure episode on the podcast, because I think that record holds up.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's so many, it's, I don't want to be grim and say, people will find out about this stuff after we're dead, which is just what usually happens with, with jazz records. But it's a great catalog that, I think people will, come back around to. It's just, there's so much stuff. There's such a sea of stuff out there these days. How do you sift through it all? It's crazy.
That is true. Hey, I wanted to ask you, what's it like working with Barbra Streisand?
Well, for all the horror stories you've heard, I found it to be a very pleasant experience, because primarily I wasn't the musical director, which I have been on many gigs where you're in the hot seat and basically everything falls to you. I was the third keyboard player back in the tall weeds. So I was basically the brass section. There were 3 keyboards and a piano.
Wait,
so
3 electronic keyboards and 1 acoustic piano, so 4 keyboards. So please give me the full ensemble, if you would.
Well, we got one guy, Rich Ruttenberg, is covering the strings. I was covering the brass, and Cheche Alera was covering kind of woodwinds and harps and accessory kind of stuff. It was their attempt at a combo as orchestra kind of thing, because she generally was traveling with a giant orchestra, 60 pieces.
She was?
Yeah. I mean, she doesn't tour. She goes out and does 5 gigs and then takes 5 years off. So it's not. But still, I mean, the logistics of that are insane. So they wanted to try something a little more nimble, and she's she's a moving target as a singer. So for Randy Waldman to be playing, and it's the piano conductor thing, I know from musical theater, is like the most thankless gig in show business.
Talk about that a little bit, though. When you say she's a moving target, was she very free with time?
Very free with time. And there's rubato things where she just wants to go. You got to go. And if he's just playing piano, no problem. But okay, everybody, and it's a giant stage. There's sightline issues and all this crazy stuff. But we managed to pull it off. It ended up sounding really good. And as I said, I stayed
just
out
keyboards.
Keyboards. There was a saxophonist, Brandon Fields, played sax and woodwinds. So there'd be some. He was playing alto, soprano. He had a clarinet, a flute, and I think that was it. There weren't any other, extended woodwind kind of thing. So there was that. There was a violinist for on top of the string sound. And then the last time we traveled, they actually brought a string quartet in addition to that. So that actually made it harder, if you know what I mean, because string players, they're always behind.
Yeah.
But we figured it out. 3 singers, drums, orchestral percussion.
Oh, really?
Just to do all the temporals and all the
Yeah.
kind of the punctuation, as it were.
Well, I'm just curious, what other percussion?
Let's see, temps, tubular bells, bongos, shaker. There was a vibe set up there, marimba too.
Wow.
So he, it was like pretty much a full show busy kind of perk setup,
No full strings, no full woodwinds or horns.
No, this the synth version this time.
No guitar, bass.
Oh, guitar, of course, and bass. Carlitos de Puerto was the bassist, the guy who plays with Chick Corea. Michael O'Neill is on guitar, my buddy from George Benson's band. He's the rhythm guitarist with George. And yeah, I'm trying to look across the band here. And as I said, 3 singers. So it was like at the end with the quartet, I think it was 17.
So what's the experience like hearing that voice live?
I didn't grow up listening to her, so she was almost just like a comic target for me, just because people had been making fun of her since I had heard of her in the 70s. I mean, I think if I told her that, she'd probably get a kick out of it. But man, I got to the first set of rehearsals, and by the end of that 2 weeks or whatever, however many rehearsals we did, it was like, oh, I see what the hubbub is about. Because she's one of these people who just get out of bed and it sounds good. I mean, she's lost a little off the top, but it's a gorgeous instrument, and it's just like, whew, she can give you the chills, man. It's still quite capable of it,
Wow.
Yeah, but I guess my experience was it was kind of entertaining for me, because I could just sit back there and watch watch them chase their tail for an hour about an ending or this or that, and just kind of watch the crazy 1%ers go through their gyrations to get back to point A. It was kind of funny.
Well, for the last 9-10 years, I've been negotiating a similar situation with Todd Rundgren. And it's a challenge, because
he's a different kind of cat. I did one set of gigs around him. I was with the opening act with Julie Christensen, and we were opening for him a couple of places when he had that tiki band.
Yeah.
Prairie was playing drums.
Same guys, yeah.
Yeah, and was it Jesse Grass maybe was on?
Jesse Grass, Chasm Sultan.
Yeah.
Todd, and then John.
But he was, Todd was clearly an odd bird. He was not, he's definitely operating on a different wavelength.
Oh yeah, but not. I mean, I had been through Cecil Taylor's band, so there's nothing that I haven't seen in terms of accommodating the artist, and so it's been a really interesting gig, because he still sings great in his 70s.
Oh no, terrific! I mean, Jesus, what a body of work, and yeah, he's terrific. I mean, he really is good.
Yeah, but it's that thing where some transitions might be tenuous, and some moments we are waiting and we are looking, and there's queuing
Oh,
going on, you
yeah,
know?
it's, maybe we get through it. But yeah, those guys, I mean, George Benson is still like that, man. I mean, I haven't worked with him for 12 years, but I went and saw them last fall. And I
Well, it
just,
should be said that you were his music director for about 17 years, right?
yeah, for a long time. And boy, what an education. But
Tell me.
he's a guy. He's one of these guys. He's still, every night, there's going to be a moment in that show where you're going to be like, whoa, what was that? What was that? He just do that just to mess with you. You see, youngster? This is, and Michael O'Neill and I, we always, that's our little moment to connect. It's just like when he does something like that, it's like, oh, there he goes again.
What do you mean when you say that?
George is a fan of, if we're playing Breeze, and he plays the solo from the record, and I questioned him about it. I said, what up? How come you're not really blowing? He says, man, people have bought this record. That solo is part of the song.
I agree, by the way.
Yeah, and I didn't at the time, but I was like, oh, you're absolutely right. That was a good lesson. He's like, let's play that first, and then maybe in the end vamp we'll get a little something, or he would always do that on Give Me the Night or on Broadway,
Yeah.
in the end vamp, where it was just like, it was something
Oh,
he'd been practicing.
The Broadway vamp out must have been crazy every night.
Oh yeah, that and Give Me the Night were the 2 points where he just cut loose, and
Wow.
you always hear something you'd hear him practicing in the day because he practices every day. You'd hear him, and then he'd launch it on the gig, give it a shot. It was just like, wow, this cat is still at it, man. That's inspiring, man. He's an inspiring cat that way.
That's so fantastic.
Determined, he's just determined. You're talking about Cecil Taylor, and I can't imagine what it was like to work with that guy. I only saw him perform once. It was in Spain in some giant arena. And he did a lot of dancing. He started by dancing. He kind of came out. It was Buto-esque, for lack of better description, sort of thing. And it was great, and it was wild, and it was Cecil Taylor. But I just uncovered some stuff at the New England Conservatory Archive. I don't know how I got pointed to this. And I think Ken Schraphorst unearthed this. They went back in the files at New England Conservatory, and Cecil Taylor, was a student there, and showing some. He wrote a column for the school paper or whatever it was, and he was kind of a real square-looking brother, man. It was kind of a thing, and somehow the thing got off on a tangent about Cecil Taylor and Jaki Byard. And Jaki was 7 years older than Cecil Taylor and already off into, playing, what we would consider Cecil Taylor style, or somebody might consider that, it's kind of a wild, maybe atonal, primarily rhythmic sort of approach. So they're saying that, Cecil was aping Jaki, as opposed to the other way around.
Well, I mean, I could weigh in on that a little bit.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Just that I would say in the interesting look at the original ingredients department, they're both big fans of Stravinsky. And it doesn't surprise me that both guys that were into Stravinsky and were classically trained would come up with something like that. And so I understand.
It could be parallel tracks too,
Oh, absolutely. I know Herbie. Cecil was into Herbie Nichols. Cecil was into, a lot of interesting guys. Tatum.
Well, I think the idea was that Jaki was in proximity to Cecil at the time. That he was hearing him a lot, or he was hearing him around town. Maybe at places like Lenny's, maybe I'm not sure, but
well, clearly they went off in different directions,
no doubt.
But yeah, I mean, working with Cecil, I haven't talked about it that much. I don't think I've ever talked about it on the podcast, but We had developed a friendship before he called me to join the group. So we would go, in fact, it's funny that you mentioned Buta. We went to see Kabuki together at Lincoln Center. We'd go to see like Angels, was it Wings of Desire, the Wim Wenders film. I remember going to see that with him. So like we would go to the Vanguard, we'd go to Bradley's, we'd go all over town, like just, it'd be like 2 days of hang. And that time I was probably like 23. I could do that.
He was kind of an endless energy sort of fellow, wasn't he?
But also, this is the thing about, you say him being square. Cecil was one of the greatest intellectuals I've ever met, ever known. So in other words, well-read on architecture, well-read on ballet and all dance forms, well-read on sports, well-read on film. Like this is a guy who just constantly fed that skull of his. And so being around that as a young person changed my life, because I was like, oh, are you serious? Like, how many books are you reading, Greg? And how many things are you getting serious about right now to feed your artistry? So I saw that very early on, that the interest in dance would end up in his music. The interest in poetry and mythology would end up in his music, as it did with Chalchochili, the stuff that we did where it was a Mayan goddesses of water, and he had so many different
it's not a narrow focus for sure.
Levels of,
it's not like this is just music, we're just going to focus on music. This is like your music is informed by your life, kind of.
It was his entire intellectual life, and he was that mind, and he was able to use all of that, and you'd have to kind of do research. I love that you had to research what the hell the titles were. That he for Olim happens to be, Olim was the Mayan god of earthquakes. Dig, so it's like all of these things you would be like, this is some mythology some mythos I want to be in touch with. And I knew all of that stuff. I went to see him play every time he played. I studied with Andrew Cyril and Steve McCall to this end, so it would kind of, when I finally went up to him and I said, Mr. Taylor, I'm a big fan of your music. I'm a percussionist. I think I could contribute something to your music. And he looked at me, this is right backstage at Symphony Space, he's playing solo. And I just walked right up to him, and he looked at me and he goes, when can I hear you? And I said, well, I'm playing next week at the Knitting Factory. And he said, okay, great. So I think we exchanged numbers, and I put him on the guest list. He didn't show up. We finished the second set, and he walks in as we're finishing the second set. And I just said to everybody, we're taking 5. I'm going to go say hi to Cecil, and we're going to play an impromptu third set.
Boy.
And
well, you got to seize that moment, man. Come on.
That was it. Didn't know if he'd ever show up again, but we were hot. I mean, we'd warmed up. We just played 2 sets of my music. So it was no problem. And I have the recording of that. I recently went through my archive, and I even announced that he's in the audience. I haven't had it transferred from the original. I don't know if it's a DAT or what the hell it is, but I went through it with a friend of mine, Melissa, that helped me organize my whole archive. And we did notes on things. And on the tape, it said, Cecil Taylor in attendance, third set, impromptu third set, something like that.
Oh, man.
And then, he didn't call me for gigs. We still hung out. But when Tony Oxley, who he's playing with in Europe, couldn't make 2 gigs in the States, he called me like at 7 in the morning. And I think I had like a office job at that time. And I was just to get by. And he calls me at 7 in the morning. He says, can you play with us tonight in Boston? We have an engagement for 3 nights. And I said, okay, yeah, absolutely. And he's like, call whoever and you'll get the information. And then I called my office job and quit.
I bet you did.
I don't think I went back.
Mission accomplished. Jesus.
My office job, and it was. Listen, yeah, he's different, but I understood a lot of things about his pain, and his.
Oh no, complex dude. I shouldn't paint him, quite with such a narrow brush. But
I'm not saying you would, but it is. I think he's often misunderstood.
But I want to send you. I want to find this stuff again and send you.
I'd love to see it
because I think you'd be totally, dig it totally.
Yeah. Were you a science fiction fan?
Not rabidly so. No. little bit of Asimov when I was a kid, but that, you know, that's about as far as it went.
How did synthesizers work into your world?
Synthesizers, wow. Well, you know, all the funk bands had a synthesizer, so I guess that's where I went with that. You know, it's like I got this Odyssey, and you know, we were playing in a cover band, playing Ohio Players, Earth, you know, that kind of stuff. You know, so I had to get the siren sound going for that song Fire, and I like that was an early lesson when I got that. It was my graduation present for high school, and there was a book that came with it that Alan R. Perlman had written. The guy, that's his initials, or the synthesizer name. It was called Learning Music with Synthesizers, and it's just a little book on physics, you know, and how it's applied to this instrument. So it's just like the building blocks of sound. It was fascinating to me. I don't know why, but making I wouldn't noisier kinds of sounds. I remember putting the amp in the window when they were jackhammering the street and trying to kind of imitate the sound. And you know, when they'd stop, I'd blast it out the window, and I'd see these guys looking around. Wait, who turned the jackhammer on? You know, that kind of stuff. So that's where the synth thing started. You know, so it was just a functional thing to use in a band, maybe to have a a lead line or something like that. That was about the time that Herbie came out with Headhunters, and George Duke was making great records. He was playing a mini Moog, but he played some ARP Odyssey. But Herbie had the ARP Odyssey for like the chameleon bass sound, so I had to get that going. That was actually the synth had not been in my possession for about 30 years, and I just got it back.
That wasn't a mini Moog bass?
No, that's an ARP Odyssey.
Oh.
And so I got it back, and the first sound I had to dial up was the chameleon bassline sound, just to make sure the thing still worked.
Yeah.
So it grew from there, and then you again with these bands like cover bands or jazz bands, we're trying to incorporate, like somebody had an ARP string ensemble, so we messed around with that, and then somebody had an Oberheim SEM at Disneyland at a gig, so this is the one Zalman uses. I can play around with this for a while, and you try to get your hands on as many different ones as you could. The local music store had a CS80 that was $6,000 that nobody ever bought, that they ended up selling when the music store closed for $50. I'm so bummed that I didn't get it, but I didn't have any place to put it. The thing weighed 200 pounds. They notoriously went out of tune, but they're worth way more than $6,000 now if they're in good shape. That's the funny thing.
Sure.
So yeah, synths, and then Prophet. Once the Prophet came in, that guy Marshall Otwell I was telling you about earlier, the piano player with Carmen McRae, he was a electronic music major, I think at UC San Diego maybe or something. But he was the first guy I knew that had a Prophet. He had Rev 1, so it always went out of tune, but it had a really gnarly sound. And so I ended up getting one of those, and then used it on gigs. I started getting professional gigs. I think the first one I did was Jose Feliciano. So I used it on that gig for brass, and a little bit of emulation, that kind of thing. And then they took over the world, and you had to kind of know the new ones that came out and try to kind of keep up with the sounds and stuff.
But did you work with sampling keyboards like the Fairlight or a Synclavier?
George had a Synclavier. I remember when I first met George, he had me over to his
Really?
house in Inglewood to try to work on a track. For some reason, he thought I was some kind of electronic genius dude. So he had this Synclavier downstairs, and we spent 2 hours trying to get a 2-bar bass line in this thing, and then he erased it. Like once we got it in there. And then it was like 3 a.m, and then we had a session at the power station the next day. So he sent me home in the limo, So that was my extent of my Synclavier experience.
Oh wow, that's funny.
But he had the $250,000 version.
Yeah, like Pat Metheny has that one. Yeah.
The full shebang bang.
Yeah.
That was in 1989, maybe something like that. But yeah, never got my hands on a Fairlight. Played around with the early samplers. It was kind of more of a novelty than anything else at that point. I like to do live sampling on the fly to make loops and stuff like that. I think I always wanted to do that. I took a Roland SDE 3000. They had a one-shot thing you could jack into it, and so you could get a 2 or 3 second sample going, and then you could trigger it yourself and try to generate some kind of rhythmic interest or something like that. So I play around with that stuff, but beyond that, now it's like I'm just not that interested. I'm more interested in the piano, and I'm more interested in non-keyboard electronic sound generator things. I've got a whole table of stuff over here with thingamagoops and Tenorion, and I've got a bass kalimba over here that I run through a ring modulator that Nels gave me. Just trying to kind of come up with unusual timbres that way. I like that.
That's it.
That's where that evolved with me. I mean, I still got my Prophet T8, which is it's over in the closet back there. I need to bust that thing out. There's just no place to put it.
Was that the last of the Prophets from that era?
It kind of was. It was 8-voice. It had the polyphonic aftertouch keyboard that Synclavier ended up using. So it's kind of unique that way, and it's just that polyphonic aftertouch. When you start using modulation through that, boy, you can get some really expressive stuff that kind of now would remind you of. Have you heard of this Raleigh keyboard? It's kind of it looks like Tempur-Pedic foam almost, and you could run your hands over it, and you kind of push into it, and you can get vibrato, and it's very tactile. It's really hard on your wrists if you play a piano because you're always wanting to dig in too far. But it's way more tactile kind of thing. So the T8 was kind of an early version of that kind of, and it was polyphonic aftertouch, so you could bring out one note in a chord, if you wanted to, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's hip.
So that was, and I sold my Prophet 5 in somewhere Dubai or something, like when I was on the road with Feliciano, and got the money and put it down on this Prophet T8, and I had to wait for I don't know how long to get this thing. They were behind in the production, and I finally got this thing. I think I have serial number 32, but yeah, I'll never get rid of that one. It's definitely got a unique bite to it.
We actually jumped off of Streisand a little fast there, but so what were those gigs like? I mean, what are the audiences? What is the situation? It must be quite opulent.
It's wild, man. It's 20,000 seaters kind of thing, and it's like, she just doesn't half step it, But then the first road gigs I did were kind of shows that size. I was in an opening act for Kenny Rogers, so it's such a different vibe. You're so kind of it's very surreal. But we played the Garden. We played the one in DC. We played. The one out on Long Island.
Nassau Coliseum.
Nassau Coliseum, where they started doing shows again. Chicago, where the Bulls play in Chicago. We played the Staples Center in L.A.
How'd you get that gig?
Well, through Michael O'Neill, really, the guitarist, the guy, my buddy from George Benson. And Randy Waldman, the pianist, knew who I was because he was a former George musical director back in the 80s. But somehow we've never really connected over the years. I mean, we've met each other, but it's like we didn't really know one another. But I think he was looking for synth guys, and Michael, plugged my name in there, and he called me out of the blue and said, "You want to do this gig?" No audition or anything like that. So that was, that's nice. And yeah, it's a charge, man. I mean, we're in ear monitors, so it's kind of a little, you're a little isolated. But I usually would take one out just to kind of feel what was going on, and it's like the love that they have for this woman is tremendous. I mean, when we played at Barclays Center in Brooklyn for 2 nights, I mean, back to Brooklyn, that was the whole deal. And I mean, she could just go out there and read the phone book, and they'd probably just go berserk. It's just there's so much love out there for her. It's really wild. So it was. I jokingly have referred to that gig as my victory lap, because I spent, when I turned 50, I was when I got off the road with George, And I realized at that point I had spent literally half my life on the road. So it was time to kind of try to stay home and do that. So, you know, when this came along, it was like, well, I guess if you're going to go on the road, this is kind of the way to do it, in the private jet and the, you know, the big thing, and you're attended to, and you have a keyboard guy that takes care of your stuff, and, you know, just the whole deal. So
Yeah,
it
the
was
production.
very pleasant. You know, they take 100 people out, you know, 90, 100 people out there on the road between all the, you know, crew, staff, and everything else. Food, they bring their own caterers. I mean, it's crazy. So yeah, all in all, a very positive experience.
Decent pay.
Great pay. Um, we played in Hyde Park last year. That was probably the capper for about 100,000 people, and that was surreal. And a crowd, you know, you get a crowd that big, you know, it's not like they're all going to be in it, but they were in it, man. I mean, singing along in key, and like it was crazy. It's just a whole other thing, man.
You know, I was thinking I'm going to be talking to Dave Witham. I got to ask him about this, but we recently lost Lyle Mays.
Yeah, he was a recluse, man. He lived out here, and nobody really ever saw much of him. I think he was involved with computers or something. Like, you know, that was kind of like his primary thing, and he would occasionally do a music video or maybe make a recording. Not even a whole record's worth, you know, just do some kind of a record. But he was like an influence, no doubt. Like those early Metheny group records. He had a great sound. He had a great synth voice.
Yeah.
And his first solo record was a big one for me. That was huge. That inspired that online record. That was definitely informed by that record to some degree.
Well, that record has.
I even used the same drummer. I used Acuna on the record, so it was like.
Yeah, that's right. And that has that tune "Slink."
Mm-hmm.
With all the different lines going against each other.
Yeah, he was
incredible.
Kind of unsung, I think, by his own design, seemingly. He certainly didn't crave the spotlight at all.
Well, when I was working with Paul Wertico from Pat Metheny Group in a duo that we had called Bang, I would attend a lot of Metheny Group shows, and I feel really fortunate because at the time I was working with Paul, I was also working with Pat on The Sign of Four, the record we did with Derek Bailey. And, you know, Pat and I got to know each other as sort of like I was a big fan of Ornette and the Song X record, and anything Pat did that was sort of semi out of the conventional area where he was just always doing cool stuff. But I got to hear Lyle a lot in the Metheny Group, and I got to also watch them vicariously. I watched as they were working on the Quartet album, I believe it was, or Imaginary Day. It was probably both around that time. And how Pat and Lyle collaborated became clear to me. And he explained it to me. Occasionally, he would tell me things like he would give Lyle a 2-note or 3-note motif just to get him started.
And just
that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that blew my mind when I realized like that's a collaboration. It's really interesting. Like, or maybe he had like 2 bars and he gives it to Lyle and Lyle.
A kernel of something, you know.
You know, and that's the real composer.
A real band leader too, you know.
And arranger.
Well, just to know your guys enough to say, oh, all I need to do is give him this, and let's watch this grow, you know.
Yeah, and I wish that we could have had more solo stuff from Lyle. Obviously, there's a trio also with Jack DeJohnette.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but there's not the Pictionary, I think it is. There's not a lot of that, but what a great musician, and I knew that you would have had some feeling for his
Well,
work.
now that you jogged my memory, the first time I heard Lyle was with Woody Herman at Disneyland, because Disneyland had a great big band series every summer. You know, I got to hear Basie and Buddy Rich, and
What was he, like 19?
it was him, Steve Houghton. It was the North Texas guys, you know, and Mark Johnson. That was the rhythm section. Yeah, that was a that's that's crazy. Wow, that was a
That's
time.
pretty crazy.
But yeah, they Woody had the always had the young progressives in his band. And
Right.
sure had them then. That's for sure.
Like Don Ellis.
Yeah, Don, he was definitely one of those guys.
Did you have any contact with Kenton coming up?
Strangely, when I was in the all Southern California high school jazz band, um, and we did a broadcast on KCET with Stan Kenton, and I was kind of there were two pianists, and somehow the guy who was supposed to play, we were going to play I think was it Willie Maiden or a Bill Holman chart called The Daily Dance that opened with kind of a chorale sort of piano part that was like, it's going by fast, and I've never played this before, and all this, but we ended up doing it. But yeah, it was kind of ships that passed in the night. It was, oh, this is Stan Kenton, this is really cool, and that was that, and it was over. So that was my real only encounter with him. I had friends that played in the band.
Oh,
Dave Stone played bass, I know, for a minute. Mike Vaccaro was an alto player in the band. He's a few years older than us. I'm trying to think who else played in Kenton's band. But it really wasn't a sound I was attracted to. Like at Long Beach City College, when I was in high school, I would play in the City College jazz band, and the director there was big into the Kenton neophonic sound, with the added brass and all that stuff. And
strings.
I mean, it's a big old sound, and if you're the marching band director, I could see why you'd be attracted to a sound like that. But I just it never rang my bell in any sort of way.
I have to
And
tell you,
he's part and parcel of Southern California. I mean, he played at the Balboa Pavilion, which is right across the street from that Studio Cafe place I was telling you about earlier, and where I met Eric Von Essen. But he was the big band. The Kenton band was a big part of the Balboa Pavilion. I mean, there might even be a record called Back to Balboa. I'm not sure.
yeah, he was important for me.
Yeah.
My dad took me to see him. My dad was a fan. My dad took me to see him, so I saw Kenton with his orchestra when they were on tour playing in a New Jersey high school auditorium, and then also we had a lot of those records. And the last concert that I took my dad to before he passed was the full orchestral ensemble
Oh wow.
played that music at Manhattan School of Music, Justin DiCioccio. And I can tell you that it was unbelievably impressive. And that it's that thing of when you hear orchestral Varese live versus the recordings.
It's kind of the power of it, just the kind of the air that's moving, right? It's
The air that's moving and the three-dimensionality of the orchestration in a real setting versus what can be kind of flattened in a recording. You're experiencing many layers, and that goes to the orchestration, and it goes to the control over the forces that these composers have if they're really going to make that stuff sound cool. And not, there are things that I always felt like with Cecil, there wasn't a lot of transparency in his large ensemble music, and that became one-dimensional to me. So
well, it just becomes like a big piece of mud thrown at the canvas, and it's like, well, there's detail in there, but I'm not really,
yeah. And Kenton's interesting too because he's a post-Schoenberg guy, and one of the first guys to embrace that Germanic serial
Was he ever
thing.
around Miod like Brubeck was, and those guys? Was he ever associated with that? Probably not. Because
Oh, but City of Glass, City of Glass is a very thoroughly modern work.
I probably,
Atonality.
it's something I could probably revisit. It's like it's been eons since I've even entertained the notion of listening to it. So
I just feel like he's another kind of neglected, rugged American individualist composer.
Well, certainly that. I'd say my big band tastes, they're kind of lean more toward Count Basie, kind of more toward Kansas City, and it's just it's dance music, and it's that pulse. There's something about that pulse that just really gets me, and the natural extension for that for me was Thad's band. The same, more advanced compositionally certainly, but still had that enthusiasm. I saw a video of Thad conducting the band, and it was like, wow. I didn't realize how energetic and involved he was with conducting. Actually, conducting that band. It was exciting to watch, man. It was a trip.
I have to tell you something really strange. Talk about double bills or pairings. When I went to South America with Cecil Taylor in 1989, the summer, it was a package tour.
So it's on A&M Records, right?
On A&M Records. And we're going down there with Max Roach Quartet, John Zorn Naked City, Horace Silver Quintet, which has my classmate from Rutgers, Mike Mossman, on trumpet, and and then Count Basie Orchestra.
Oh,
yeah. And that was an incredible experience.
Oh my God, the hang.
Because it's sort of the last moment also when everybody's like, yeah, all this stuff together.
Yeah, I'm saddened by that. I just the parsing so thin of the assumptions that people make about people, about their listening tastes, and they're just not giving them the benefit of the doubt. It's they just listen to electronica, so that we'll just focus. We'll do that narrow focus thing, and I just hate that so much. It's not good. It's not good for the business, and it's not good for the culture. It's just like we were talking about earlier. It's like you used to get on a field trip and you go hear an orchestra whether you liked it or not, and you probably end up liking it once you saw it. Because it's like people playing instruments. It's interesting. It's like, wow, what are these people doing? I had it, the Long Beach Municipal Band has been the longest running municipal band in the nation's history now. 108, 10 years or something. They had missed this year, unfortunately. But they used to they put the band in a trailer where the sides fold down, and there's the band, and they come play. Or they'd come play in the elementary school or the junior high auditorium, and it was just like, we love that, man. It was so good. And some of it was about the music, some of it was about the oboe player's face turning so red when he was playing that it was comical. And it was just like, but it kept your attention, and in some strange way, it was all part of the experience.
Yeah, it kept us out of trouble, like
without a doubt.
If you weren't doing sports, then you were just basically going to be doing something after school in the arts, and you come home late. I mean, I had to give up sports to do all the arts because I was doing both. Finally, by I guess sophomore year of high school, I had to tell my dad, I'm not going to play football. I'm not going to do anything.
Oh wow, that's a heavy thing to have to tell a parent.
It was a little heavy. But he was cool with it, and he knew that I was like totally into music, and that was what I was living for anyway. So it was a moment, but just to be able to do 3 different activities and have all of that music going in, and all the music, so it's just beginning to have the whole process start as a young person. And I try to remember that feeling to this day, and I think I still have that feeling to this day of what it was like to feel really excited about a project.
Right, about the deal. Well, that's something I've actually been battling, probably the last couple of years. After doing almost 20 years of this musical theater thing, which was an unlikely avenue for me, but I used it as a means to an end to get a pension and, I learned a bunch of stuff. It was really good that way, but it's a real pressure cooker. And it's like, it takes its toll. And then combining with the fact that a lot of my creative kind of ventures kind of evaporated in the course of that period of time. Like, the Goatette went away, and Crypto went away, and there are a couple other things went away, and Portable Universe was on hold for a while because the cable access had died in Long Beach until somebody finally resurrected it. And, I got to the pandemic, and it was like, wow, you're really kind of out of touch with what, you know, with what makes you tick with this music thing, because it's been it's been a means to an end. It's, you
Yeah.
know, a real journeyman kind of thing. So this little break has been great for me. It's just like I needed to air out. I needed to actually have some distance from music to come back around to get to the music that I know I love and want to do. So my body needed to unwind just from all that tension. It's still unwinding, but I spend, you know, I wrestle with Bach every day at the piano, and we have a good time, and just learning to relax a little bit more. I've found some interesting books on piano technique that are just really wild, really kind of counterintuitive to the way I had learned things. So it's good to kind of, you know, poke yourself and stretch your brain that way. And you know, I spent a lot of energy on visual things. I've been making videos and had that cable access show for 20 years now, and kind of took the creative energy and kind of have been pouring it into that for the time being. And but to help other people, really, it's to, you know, do electronic press kits for people, or document their concerts, or this, that, or the other thing, you know. And I really enjoy that. I've always enjoyed photography, and it's a wonderful marriage of the two things, because the sense of timing and rhythm involved is really similar to music, and I definitely gravitate toward that. So I've had that, but it's like now I'm finally starting to kind of, okay, the music thing's starting to resonate a little bit more. I think remastering this old record might have helped spur that a little bit. I've got music, I just need to record it, and now it's like, well, I guess you got to kind of do it quarantine style. You know, we're going to have to. So I had been really dragging my feet about that, because I don't want to do it that way. I want to get the guys here, but the guys live all over the country, and it's a logistical nightmare. So, you know, I think the time is coming now to just kind of, you know, the creative things are starting to come back into the focus for me. You know. So that's been a good thing. I mean, I'm happy to hear that you can maintain that spark, because that is what we live for. I mean, it is what inspires what we do. I mean, it's the bottom line, really.
Yeah, I mean, we all experience moments of darkness, and we all experience these lulls in activity. I mean, I always feel like I've been self-motivated anyway.
You're very good at that. I'm not myself, not so much. It's like things have always come to me. I haven't had to be a self-generating kind of person. So the TV show was probably the first thing that, you know, that's all, you know, that's me pushing that ball forward. You know, my buddy Matt has done some really fun, creative things in the course of it too, but it's my ball. So it's like, yeah, that's a good thing. But I need to do it more with the music. It's a bit of an obstacle right now.
Well, you know, it's a process of you know, it wanes and it crests, and it. I just feel like we have so much time right now. I just don't
Yeah.
get bored. You know, I also want to just kind of stay productive, and that's easier said than done. But you know, certainly, it never really was going to reach millions of people when you wrote something anyway.
Right.
So, you know, just continue doing that. Continue.
Really, the thing is to do it. I mean, that was always what it ever was, you know. But it's just, it's easy to kind of feel helpless in the wake of the times being the way they are.
Yeah.
But you know, it was like that before the pandemic too. I mean, you got something to say, you might as well say it, man. Time's a wasting. I mean, we're not getting any younger here.
Yeah. Well, you know, Dave, I got to say, it's such a pleasure to speak with you. I don't get to see you enough. We talk from time to time. I've gotten really lucky with being able to have my music played by you, and just wanted to say that the musicality, the musicianship, the attention to detail that you brought to my stuff has always just meant so much to me, and has really blown my mind as a composer, to have someone that takes your material and really shapes it and plays it and has fun with it and can relax in it and can be free within it. I mean, that's something that is very rare. And I've always enjoyed playing with you, and you are just, you're the shit, man. I gotta say.
Oh man, thanks, Greg. Well, the feeling is most definitely mutual. You're a very inspiring figure, man, and I appreciate the way your your impetus keeps pushing this ball forward, and now you're documenting these things like this. This is important stuff. I'm glad. I mean, not that I'm important, but it's good to document people. You know, the people that do kind of fall through the cracks of the mainstream or whatever. That's huge stuff, and the work you're doing with Yale and all that stuff is just, that's it's fabulous, man.
Well, I thank you, Dave. I mean, it certainly is. It's a bit of giving back for me. It's also a way of saying we were here. This is what we did, and
Yeah.
the process of each person is of incredible interest to me. How people work with different skill sets and with different upbringings and with different.
Yeah, yeah. Everybody's got their way, right? I
Yeah,
just watched that. I just watched that Milford Graves documentary. Oh my God, what an inspiring dude that is! I mean,
Milford and
you
Andrew.
must know him, right? I mean, you've got to know this guy.
Yeah, so Milford is wonderful, incredibly inspiring. I did his oral history for Yale Oral History.
Oh, great,
And then I also recently released a piece that I wrote for the 50th anniversary of Yale Oral History, was called Call Upon the Masters, The Vortex of Sound, which used samples from Milford and Andrew Cyril's voice from my interviews with them.
great. Oh man, I want to hear that.
I will send that to you, and it's up on Bandcamp.
Oh,
But
okay.
Milford blew my mind because, to a certain extent, being a younger white guy on the free jazz scene, a lot of guys didn't take me seriously. It
Right.
wasn't it wasn't that the old black guys didn't take me seriously. It was like a lot of white guys. It was like sort of a weird jealousy thing.
Mm, mm, mm.
So when I met Milford, it was at Rashid Ali's funeral, and Andrew introduced me to Milford, and Milford knew who I was from the Cecil record because Bill Dixon and Milford were teaching at Bennington in Vermont, and they would use the Cecil record to teach Cecil's music to young people because
Mhm.
the pieces were so short on Inflorescence.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Don't
You know,
get it.
Inflorescence has like a 2-minute song, a 3-minute song, a 5-minute Cecil song.
Just
And
good. This is enough for a
yeah,
student.
it's not the 45-minute Cecil extravaganza, you know? And so
Yeah.
Milford knew my work from that. So when I did his oral history, we were very comfortable. Um, he had some really funny things to say about me working for Yale, as did Andrew. But it's not funny, but just, I understand.
Insightful.
I understand, where they're coming from and in terms of representation. And so
Right.
that's what I've tried
Yeah.
to bring to the Yale thing, is to, have a picture of what is American music.
The whole thing, the whole spectrum. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, he's the guy that has that spark like you do. We're just keep the stuff, keep it moving forward. I mean, talk about a curious mind, this guy. That documentary was fascinating to me. It was one I had been meaning to watch for a long time, and then once I did, it was like, why did I wait?
He's wonderful, but he's in not good health.
I know he's not doing well at this point. That's tragic. For somebody who studied the heart for so long, to be in trouble like that.
And I sat with him in the midst of all of the containers of herbal cures when I interviewed him.
Mm.
It was interesting. He has quite a setup in his home, and you can go for consultations, and he'll tell you what herbal methods are available. And yeah, he's super brilliant, beautiful guy. I'll play. When you hear this piece, you'll hear his voice, and you'll hear that energy that you're talking
And
about.
and the shit he plays on the drums, man. Some of the examples in that movie, it was just like, what is this guy doing, man? It's just so unorthodox, but it's so like root kind of stuff, man. It's like, it really blew me away.
And he was a Latin jazz percussionist first.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. Yeah, well,
Coming.
they all started somewhere, It's like I have Wally Snow. He's a percussionist out here. He played with Parch at UCLA, or played for Parch at UCLA. But he was in the service with Albert Eiler. Said he sounded like Ben Webster back then.
Yeah. Yeah, and then when he played soprano, he sounded like Bechet.
Yeah, and he said he always respected Albert because he knew that he had the history behind what he was doing, when he went off on his own.
Yeah. I mean, my interview with Milford is available to everyone for, no fee. It's available at the Yale University, where all of the other interviews, I've done over 100 for them now, various people.
Check that out.
And yeah, and I recommend the Milford one. It's very fun and vivacious and very frank. And
Sure.
we get into some stuff. And, he's just, you're right. He's a beautiful cat.
Well, he reminds me of all people, Stanley Banks, the bass player with George, who's from Bed-Stuy. Just a dude from the neighborhood kind of guy. He reminds me of that, but with an incredibly curious mind.
Look, those guys are mostly all self-educated. They went to the library. They took it upon themselves to evolve, and that's an inspiration to me. And I have told them that those AACM guys, the self-starters, those were the guys.
Jazz has a great history of that, doesn't it? It's just
Mingus, anybody who had their own thing.
Out of necessity.
Out of necessity, right? I could never get a manager. I could never get somebody who was going to run my thing. So I had to figure out how to run my thing. And I ran it the best I could. I made some stupid mistakes. I did some really creative problem solving. I drove around a lot in a Dodge Dart.
Oh, yeah. And look at you now.
No, but this is the thing. I enjoyed every minute of it.
Of course. No, you lived a life, man. It's like, not that you're anywhere near the end of it, but it's like, we're on this weird pause right now, the surreal vacation, as I call it. It's,
yeah.
We're all just champing at the bit to get back to what we love and want to do, And I think there'll be a huge outburst of stuff. I think, it's bound to happen. I mean, it's just human nature,
Well, speaking of huge outbursts, I wanted to talk about that 50th birthday concert of mine at the Baked Potato, where you were omnipresent.
Oh my God, yeoman's duty. Even on
you were a house keyboardist.
I had no idea how it went.
Well, I wanted to represent all these different tangents in my musical life for the half-century mark.
Yeah, well.
And that was such a crazy, crazy moment for me because my dad had just passed away.
Mm.
So my dad passed away at 74, and I think at 3 weeks later, I turned 50. So I didn't talk about it because I wasn't prepared to talk about it at that point. And I was just sort of dealing with it and turning 50 and then choosing this program that represented different aspects of my life, So
begin to describe the set list.
Right. So that means that I was going to play duet drums with Nels Cline. It meant that you and I and Ivan Johnson were going to play some of my trio, piano trio stuff, and we were going to improvise with Jeff Gauthier and Doug Lunn.
Doug Lunn, yeah.
So that's another thing, just all the times I played with Doug at the Potato with Mike Keneally, and then playing there with you guys and Lauren Baba and Miguel Atwood Ferguson and
GE was there, wasn't he?
Yeah.
GE play that night? He played, right?
GE played and Rick Masalam played. Right. And at one point we all played together. And then also you joined us for a set of Mahavishnu music, which I wanted to do.
Talk about working without a net, boy.
Yeah, so you played some neat sort of Rhodes inflected electronic stuff, and just what a joy to have you there and celebrate that. I really felt like I needed to do it in Los Angeles because you guys have been just such a
Well,
huge part of my musical life.
well, that's in what going on like 20 some years now, right? For me, anyway. I know it goes back longer with Alex and those guys for you.
Yeah, it's 25, 26 years with Alex and Nels, and then probably over 20 years with you because we were
Was it
doing,
maybe like '99? We did that at the museum in LA.
yeah, I was thinking
I've got
98.
that evidence somewhere. I recorded that, as I recall. Jim Whitney played bass.
Yeah, and we had Jim Whitney at one point.
We did a tour.
Yeah,
We went up to Oregon.
that's right. That's where we met Zoot Rollo for the first time.
That's right. That's right.
He came to the sound check and the gig, and we hung out. And then I ended up doing his record probably about a year later from that, 2 years later from that. Yeah. But you know, I
He's
just,
out there in the world, right? That's where it's all. That's what it's all about.
you know, you're such a big part of so many great musical moments in my life, and I love you for that, man. Thank you.
Right back at you, man. Much love.
So we got to do this again. I really enjoyed speaking with you, man.
Yeah, that's. We can get off on any number of subjects, I'm sure.
It's so true. And next time we'll get into some more stuff. But you know, thank you to everybody for listening. I really appreciate the outpouring of responses we've been getting for these. We've had a lot of interest and the kind of stuff we're getting into in these discussions. So I really appreciate all the love that we've been getting. Please like and subscribe us. And
If I
thank
may,
you. Yeah,
do a
please,
little
Dave.
plug here, www.portableuniverse.tv for the Portable Universe archive.
And davidwitham.com.
Yeah, same region of the internet right there.
Yeah.
There's also a YouTube channel, Dave Baby 9000.
And we'll post all those links, obviously, in the bottom of this thing, and you'll be able to click onto Dave's amazing work. Always something interesting, always something different coming from Dave. Dave, thank you so much, buddy. It's just a pleasure.
My great pleasure, man. All the best.
All right, man. Bye-bye.